Would you come sit right here for me? So, you said when you were sitting in the car you heard something?
I heard something, so I thought it was a train.
Where did it sound like it was coming from?
Yeah, it was like going like zzz. Like somebody was lasering somebody.
Like somebody was lasering something?
Is he big like me or little like you?
He's tall.
He's tall.
This is 5-year-old Zanaya Jackson. A few days before this was recorded, Zanaya's mother was found dead alongside her longtime girlfriend on a remote island near Houston, Texas. During the interview, the little girl claimed to have seen a stranger entering her house that morning, but detectives didn't believe her. Instead, they became convinced that the victim's own father was behind the double murder.
This is your daughter. What happened?
That's what we're trying to find out. I don't want y'all to look at me as a suspect.
Why would somebody want to do this to her?
I've been asking myself that question too.
Surprised that the detectives would consider him a suspect, the father tried to reason with them, but the lieutenant in charge of the investigation wouldn't have it. On the contrary, in about 10 seconds, he's gonna snap at him.
She had the supreme beat out of her. Brittany had her brains beat in. You explain that. You can explain it. Look at this camera and show some remorse.
Do you remember that day, Zanaya?
Yeah.
Tell me what you remember.
Houston, Texas, March 8th, 2014. The police are at the residence of Reverend Ivan Jackson and his wife, Mary. They have dire news concerning the disappearance of their 24-year-old daughter, Crystal. From the next room, Zanaya, Crystal's 5-year-old daughter, can hear her grandparents crying.
911, what's your emergency?
I have 2 dead people at the back of my store by my dumpster.
When they told me that my baby was dead, it hurted me. I'd never been hurt as bad as I was hurt that day.
Are they male or female, could you tell?
One appears to be a woman.
I never dreamed that I would have to bury my own child. I couldn't do nothing but go in the house and hug my granddaughter.
At the other end of the city, Brittany's aunt, Ebony McQuaid, is getting ready to go out when she notices that her phone has received an unusually high number of notifications.
I remember just getting dressed, and I just happened to go to Facebook, and I had messages galore. I'm like, what's going on? Clicked on one of the messages, and he was just like, say, friend, I think they found your niece and her girlfriend dead.
Shocked by what she was reading, Ebony put on the news on her TV.
I went to Channel 13, and that was the first place I seen was her and Crystal.
Murder mystery tonight on the Bolivar Peninsula.
How the women were killed remains a mystery. Both were African American and homosexual. Many believe the women were targeted because of their sexual orientation.
I was just numb. And I just remember calling my brother, and I'm like, what happened?
Brittany's father, James Cosby, barely had enough time to process the information before Ebony called him. A few hours before the story hit the newsstands, the police went to his house and informed James of his daughter's passing.
What's going on? Are you the father, Brittany's dad? Yes, James. Yeah. Sit down, brother. Please sit down. You just have a seat.
Brittany's dad.
What happened?
That's what we're trying to find out.
What happened?
You grieve all you need to grieve. We understand. Right now, we want to find out who did this. Okay?
Who's the girl with Brittany? Real thin? But
That's her girlfriend.
Okay.
That's her girlfriend. That's Crystal.
It is Crystal?
The cause of their death remained under investigation, but Brittany, James's daughter and Crystal's girlfriend, had been violently assaulted. For this reason, the police believed the crime had been motivated by hate against the women. As they began interviewing their families, they were surprised to learn that even Crystal's own father, Ivan Jackson, was against their relationship.
I used to tell my daughter, I say, you ain't gay, you damn straight, because she just experimenting on something. She don't know what she get into.
So you never even would let Brittany come in the house?
When she come in the house, she go sit right there where you sitting.
Okay.
I told my daughter, I say, look, that girl gonna be the cause of your death.
As a fervent preacher in a Baptist church, his religion clashed with his daughter's identity, a fact he wasn't scared to share with police when they brought his family in for questioning.
Tell us a little bit about your daughter.
I love my daughter. It's hard. I didn't like her changing her sexual orientation, but it wasn't nothing I could do because she was grown. I told Crystal that lesbian stuff would take her out of here. I knew it.
I accepted it, but he couldn't. It brought friction between both of them.
Ivan's convictions and the fact that he kept repeating Crystal's homosexuality would be the cause of her death alarmed the officers. When he realized that the police suspected him, he allowed them to question Zanaya, who had been with Brittany and Crystal on the day of their disappearance. Immediately, an officer brought the little girl into another room.
Would you come sit right here for me? You like to color? Zanaya, what is the first thing you do when you get to school?
Eat breakfast.
Tell me everything that happened from that morning to the time you went to sleep.
The morning when I was getting ready for school at nighttime, my mama was in the car, me and her. My mama said, "Stay in the car," and I stayed in the car, so I was taking my mom's own off.
Even at such a young age, Zanaya knew something was wrong, but at only 5 years old, the police weren't certain she understood what actually happened that morning. This was until Zanaya started talking about an encounter she had with a potential suspect.
I heard something, so I thought it was a train. So I just sit it back. I just had my seatbelt on and waited like this so the stranger wouldn't see me.
Unsure of what to make of Zanaya's statement, the police continued to investigate Ivan. They knew something had happened the day before Brittany and Crystal's disappearance. The girls came by the Jackson residence to pick up Zanaya and show off the new car they had purchased together, but things quickly turned awry.
She wanted me to come out to see her new car. Me being as stubborn as I am, I wouldn't even get up out the chair.
After the fight, Crystal left with Brittany and Zanaya. Her mother attempted to call her multiple times to set things right, but Crystal never answered. Later that same day, Ivan decided to take action. He was convinced something was off. He grabbed his .25 caliber handgun and headed to the Cosby's house.
My husband said he was going to go to the house and see what was going on. And if Brittany did something to Crystal, he was going to do something to her. But I told him, no, leave the gun at home.
Fortunately, Mary was able to talk him out of going.
Ivan said that he never actually went to the Cosby residence. He never made contact with Crystal.
As the days passed and the investigation staggered, the detective eventually received the girl's autopsy report, confirming that Crystal had been killed by a gunshot wound and Brittany via blunt force trauma. They were still hoping Ivan was lying, but the ballistic report proved otherwise. The bullet that hit his daughter was of a higher caliber than his own gun. Finally cleared of the accusation, Ivan couldn't help but look back at the reasons why the police were convinced he committed the crime in the first place.
I carry a lot of guilt in me because the things I should have said to my daughter, I didn't say when I had the chance. Watching them put my baby in that vault and have to leave her at that cemetery. Was the hardest thing that ever happened to me. I took plenty bodies to the cemetery, but I never had to leave a child at the cemetery.
Sadly, both funerals were organized on the same day, pushing the couple apart, even in death. And despite not mentioning their significant others during the services, those who truly knew them knew they deeply loved one another.
You can tell they loved each other. You can tell that they cared about the well-being of Crystal's daughter.
She derived a lot of joy and purpose from the family she was building with Crystal and their daughter.
I think Brittany really, really in love with Crystal. She wants to get married. She wants to be with Crystal forever.
With Crystal, everybody loved her. She would give you the shirt off her back. She was an amazing girl. She was. God, I missed her so much.
Brittany was very outgoing. She loved family time. She loved movies. She loved pickles. She loved to laugh. The biggest question was who did it? Because I was just like, who will harm her? You're angry, but you're hurt at the same time. So it's like, I just wanted to get to the bottom of what happened.
The investigators were back at square one now that Ivan had been cleared as a suspect.
We would have a theory, and then you come across something that totally throws a monkey wrench into that. So you're starting completely over.
But the detectives discovered other pieces of evidence as the case went on, including a bloody fingerprint and CCTV footage of the woman's car on the night of their disappearance.
The guard stopped this vehicle. As he's talking to the driver steps out of the car.
They were shocked to see that neither Brittany nor Crystal was behind the wheel.
You can tell the person's height, you can tell the build. It was a male person, but the camera's so far away you can't see a detailed face.
Only one thing was sure to them. Even though Zanaya claimed that a stranger came into her house while she was waiting in the car, the autopsy report convinced the police otherwise.
Her skull was actually broken open. She was not only hit once in the forehead, but 4 extra times in the back of the head. It was definitely our feeling that it was overkill.
It took somebody with such great force to break her neck with that blow that we knew it had to be anger. It had to be personal.
Detective Kitchens, a rookie on his first homicide case, was confident that whatever Zanaya saw wasn't imaginary. So he brought Brittany's dad, James Cosby, the only other person present that morning, to the sheriff's office for an interview.
You told me last you saw Brittany was Wednesday night?
No.
Thursday morning?
Yeah.
What time did Crystal and Brittany?
The same time they usually leave every morning. It was like just a normal morning. Nothing was out of the ordinary.
James seemed honest, but Kitchens was puzzled. Why did Brittany and Crystal leave without taking Zanaya to school that morning?
That's the one thing that's out of the order.
I was trying to figure it out.
That's because if normally they would take her to school, but yet they left her there that morning. No, man, I know you're doing the best you can. And as things come up, you know you got my number, so call any time.
The next day, now a week after the murders, James's family joined hundreds of grieving locals in downtown Houston for a statewide memorial.
It was being held to honor Brittany and Crystal because there had been a lot of public grief over what had happened to them.
The murder in Galveston hit close to home across Texas. Ceremonies like this one are being held in Dallas, Corpus Christi, and here in Austin.
People all over Texas sympathized with James, Ebony, Ivan, Mary, and the newly orphaned Zanaya.
Photos of Brittany Cosby and Crystal Jackson are surrounded by flowers and glowing lights.
You can't really put something like this in the word. Witness a good shirt, my baby.
On that very same day, Kitchens and his partner visited the Cosby's house. He intended to question James some more and maybe chat with Annie Lee, Brittany's great-grandmother.
Once we get to Halter Street, James Cosby is actually at a vigil, so we speak with a caretaker that's watching Annie Lee Cosby.
Annie Lee's cousin, Cora Ledette, had been helping around the house for a few years. When Kitchens asked if she had noticed anything suspicious in the past week, she slowly walked out of the house, closed the door behind her, and asked the detectives to follow her into the carport. Sensing she had something important to share, Kitchens pulled out his recorder.
And I looked around, I noticed that the carport was spotlessly clean. And I had never seen it clean before, never. Even though I had had my grandkids to move trash out of there, it was always debris, something that needed to be cleaned up.
Looking around the carport, Kitchens saw nothing unusual until he noticed a pile of small bricks on the concrete floor.
Why would there be 5 bricks laying here in the carport? There's got to be a purpose for them being there. And what I saw just took my breath away. There was what appeared to be 4 to 5 drops of blood on the ground. I immediately began to look even closer at that point, which is when I noticed 2 more drops of blood up near the door facing. That led me to believe that we may be standing in our crime scene.
Unaware of the discovery made at his house, James Cosby was still out at the memorial, answering the local news questions and praising the detectives for their diligence.
You get to find out what's happening. Detectives are doing They do. They keep us informed as much as they can, but there's nothing yet.
Towards the end of the vigil, Kitchens and his partner, Sergeant Kilburn, arrived and arrested James in front of everyone.
They ended up picking him up was at the vigil. This is not looking good for Mr. Cosby.
After the arrest, Kilburn returned to the scene and forced open the garage James had been staying in. Inside, he turned on his UV light. He couldn't believe what he saw.
Everywhere we were looking, we were finding something with blood on it. On the carpet, on the couch, on clothes that were in the room.
Back at the station, Kitchens and his lieutenant were informed of the situation. They believed they now had enough evidence to confront him.
Were you aware that we were back in the house today?
Today?
Can you explain to me why or how in your room where you stay that carpet throughout that room and furniture throughout that room is saturated with fresh blood? You've been in that room, sleeping in that room, with your daughter's blood on the carpet.
I ain't seen no stain. I would see some stain.
He had the supreme beat out of him.
And it's all over your room.
Brittany had her brains beat in.
It wasn't long before Lieutenant Hansen's patience reached its absolute limit. He simply couldn't handle James's cold and emotionless reactions.
You explain that. You can explain it. That's your daughter's head smashed in. Thrown away like a garbage.
This went on for over 5 hours. During that time, forensic scientists matched the bloody fingerprint found near the dumpsters to James. Slowly, the noose tightened around the suspect.
Everything points back to James Larry Cosby Jr. And you expect us to believe that James Larry Cosby Jr. don't know? You need to man up. Finish the sentence for me. I'm going to start a sentence. I want you to finish it.
What is it?
I did not do this because...
I'm not finishing now.
What do you want to do?
No.
Okay. We done?
We're done.
Stand up. Move on back.
James was merely charged with tampering with evidence, since his fingerprints only matched those found at the dump site. If the police couldn't find more clues soon, James would only face a short sentence. Around this time, Ivan started appearing on the news, talking about Crystal's passing and how Zanaya was dealing with that.
I come home in the evening, my daughter's not there. I look at her daughter. Sometimes her daughter has nightmares, so we have her in counseling now.
This was when it clicked for the detectives. Now that they had more details, Zanaya's story made more sense. The stranger she mentioned in her first interview was probably James Cosby, who had just moved back with his family at the time, so they asked Ivan to bring her back to the station for a second interview. This time, they focused on what she heard and saw to see if it matched what they had discovered.
Did you ever hear anything from his room? Tell me everything you heard from his room.
A gunshot.
You heard a gunshot. Tell me how you know it was a gunshot.
Because he just, in his room, he said, he took them to outside and just shoot them.
Okay, did somebody tell you that or did you see that?
I see that.
When she left the car to look for her mom, Zanaya must have walked into James's room, seen the blood, and connected the dots after she learned that Brittany and her mother had been murdered.
There was blood splatter in his room.
Okay, tell me where the blood splatter was in his room.
On his bed.
You saw it on his bed? Okay, did you see it anywhere else?
On his floor.
Some on his floor?
He just decided to kill my mother and his daughter.
Based on what Zanaya had told me, I hypothesized that Crystal took Zanaya, placed her into the car. At the same time, on the inside of the house, James Cosby and Brittany Cosby became involved in a physical altercation, at which time James Cosby snapped and beat Brittany to death. Crystal walked back into the house and was watching this take place and immediately ran out the side door to the back of the vehicle, which is where James Cosby, we believe, caught up with her, and then shot her in the head.
All along, 5-year-old Zanaya Jackson was the key. The quiet little girl may not have yet understood the full extent of what had happened that morning, but she could place James at the scene, with the weapon in hand, attacking her mother. A month later, police found Brittany and Crystal's car abandoned in a parking lot. In the blood-soaked trunk, they found a bullet encased in the luggage rack. In Texas, it isn't necessary to prove motivation for murder cases. However, through interviews with family members and people close to the Cosbys, the detectives concluded that it all started when Brittany and Crystal bought their new car together.
Annie Lee Cosby had changed her will and left everything to Brittany because Brittany was already taking care of everything while her dad was not present in the residence.
He had asked Annie to co-sign for a vehicle, and she'd refused. And then she turned around and co-signed a vehicle for Brittany and Crystal. And it starts to paint a picture of jealousy, pure jealousy.
Today in court, it was a tale of two fathers, one sentenced to life behind bars, and the other choosing a life of forgiveness. Today, Jackson's father, Reverend Ivan Jackson, attended what would be the last hearing in the case of his daughter's murder.
Me and my wife and my church family, we have been praying for life without a possibility of parole instead of the death penalty, because killing him is not going to bring either one of them back.
And his prayers were answered. Cosby was convicted of capital murder, an automatic sentence of life without parole.
No matter what the situation was, they didn't deserve to die. It's been really tough, but on the same token, that it has made me much stronger, because I know I have a responsibility to do now, and that's raise my grandbaby.
It was... I cried. It's a relief. What we did for those families.
After the case was closed, Ivan and Mary got full custody of Zanaya, and Detective Kitchens became her godfather. Every year, they celebrate Crystal and Brittany's anniversary along with members of the Jackson family, even if it's still difficult.
It's still tough. I still struggle with Crystal not here. Matter of fact, on Friday I went to visit Crystal grave and Brittany grave. Therefore, when I go to put flowers on Crystal grave, me and my wife put flowers on Brittany grave.
I still have a hard time accepting it a little bit, I guess you could say. I'm angry.
Admiringly, Zanaya, now a teenager, somehow found the strength within her to grow from the experience.
How often do you think about Mom?
Almost every day. What comes to mind, I just think of her smile.
In 2021, MTV sent journalist Dometi Pongo to interview the then 12-year-old girl.
What do you think you might want to do?
I want to be a lawyer.
What kind of lawyer?
I want to work with the family against the criminal.
What made you want to do that?
My mom.
So you want to be able to help other families the way attorneys helped yours?
Yeah.
Today, she wishes that anyone facing violence and loss could see that every cloud has a silver lining, no matter what may happen.
It's okay. Think about the bright side of it, you know? If your parent was killed, you are the reason that everybody can be happy because they have you. You're like the seed. Like if you cut down a tree, you're the seed that fell on the ground. So it just sprouts up and you look just like them.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for joining me for tonight's story. I always appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you sleep soundly. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more horror bedtime stories.